now is Hugh Hewitt, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network. He's an NBC News political analyst. Good afternoon to you.
And thank you, Sheinelle. Happy Easter anticipatorily.
It's
good to be here.
What do you make of all of this?
Well, I don't like the decision yesterday. I was on with Brian last night, Williams, on the 11th hour, explaining the only good reason I can come up with for making this decision is so that President Trump can rather publicly reverse it. There is no real reason for doing it because journalists are going to find out anyway, and secret meetings can be held all over town. The most famous one was held at the Willard Hotel, I believe, with ABC's correspondent back in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I'll say this. They had 2 weeks of great news coming out of the White House, beginning with the confirmation hearings of Justice Gorsuch, then his confirmation, his actual breaking of the Reed Rule, or using of the Reed Rule to break the filibuster. They had the response to the Syrian use of sarin. They had the Afghanistan use of the Moab. Great visit from President Xi. Great visit from the NATO Secretary General. Just no reason to step on your momentum. And I think the decision of the logs does that. I'm still quizzical about it. So
if you're in their minds, which is hard to do, in your opinion, how does the Trump administration benefit from this then? Don't most people want to see greater transparency, or at least the optics of it, from the White House?
At least the optics of it. Yes. That's the, in fact,
I mean, that's just the truth. I threw that in there because that's the reality. I mean, frankly, like you said, you can go to a coffee shop or you can just keep names off the log, and we all recognize that. But at least the optics of it, I think the announcement of this, like you said, it was a blow.
Yeah, it was not, I thought through. There's a new book out, Sheinelle. It's reviewed in the Wall Street Journal today about chiefs of staff at the White House. And I don't know that Reince Priebus was consulted on this or they thought it through. It might be something you'd want to do in a political campaign. It might be something you want to do in the transition when you don't want to embarrass people who are interviewing for jobs. And it's something that can be done, for example, when people interview to be one of the 20 circuit court who are going to be named by the president over the next few weeks. But you have exceptions in the rules for national security and privacy already. So I hope they reverse this quickly and get back to the news that he was making, which is it looks like General Mattis and the vice president and General Dunford and everyone in the chain of command have really reasserted American foreign policy coherence and effectiveness abroad. The North Korea crisis is real. The Afghanistan offensive is successful. The pressure in Syria is significant. I wish they would just stay focused on that as opposed to dueling with the media unnecessarily. Well,
we talked about transparency. Let me ask you about the news of the day. As we saw moments ago, tax day protests are taking place all around the country today. They're calling for the president to release his tax returns in a separate show of transparency. Do you think the timing of this decision on the White House logs just hours before the protests began, was that intentional, or what should we make of these protests? What do you think?
Well, I don't think they're connected, number one. Number two, I think the protests are significantly underwhelming me today. I was in Washington for the Women's March, and that was enormous, huge, and significant. I think the Kansas 4th District disappointed Democrats. They dropped 25,000 Democrats in turnout. They're not going to flip the 6th in Georgia next week. They're going to be disappointed again. And, in fact, the confirmation of Justice Gorsuch took a lot of wind, I think, out of the sails of Democrats nationally that we're beginning to see. And so the president has actually found his footing, with the exception of this decision we're talking about and a couple other missteps earlier in the month. And I think he has got momentum going forward. And I begin to feel, this is, of course, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I voted for Donald Trump. I begin to feel Democrat sort of exhaustion at fighting things that they can't really change until 2018.
You say you're a conservative, and listen, you will say if you don't like something, like you just talked about this decision about the logs. So with that said, if you take away some of the signs that are a little bit inflammatory, isn't there something to the argument that he should release his tax return?
Oh, sure. I asked him that on air in 2015. I asked him again during a debate, and both. I wish he would. I think every president should.
And the answer about the fact that he's under audit, being as though we know that's not necessarily true, what is the truth? Why won't he?
And so I believe in transparency. I thought Mitt Romney waited too long to release his. I always believe in releasing tax returns. But he's not going to do it. And what I think is perfectly crystal clear is most of the American people don't care.
Why don't you care? Why doesn't it get under your skin a little bit that he won't?
Because I care more about North Korea. Within the first day of fighting North Korea.
But if we take each issue as it is, why doesn't that bother you? Why is that okay? that he...
Just because on the hierarchy of needs, if I may borrow from psychology, it is so far down the list of what's going on in the world that it doesn't grate at me the way that the left wants it to. And while I would like to see them, I am much more happy that we have got General Mattis at the Secretary of Defense and Rex Tillerson at State, and especially Justice Gorsuch at the Supreme Court, that I submerged that issue about taxes way, way down on my list of priorities. And so I think we come back to the same issue again and again. What matters most to the individual? To me, it's national security in the courts, and so I don't care as much about something that bothers me, like the White House logs or his taxes.
You know, it's interesting.
Transparency issues generally.
I hear people screaming at the television, but the thing is, you think what you think, and a lot of people agree with you. So me, you know, yelling at you is not going to do anything if it doesn't bother you.
You put up with so much grief, Sheinelle, whenever I come on. I appreciate it. You're another one of those Northwestern Medill Mafia who are very good at their jobs, and I appreciate your having me on.
That is true. You know what? I'm sure I'll be talking to you again soon. Hugh Hewitt, enjoy your weekend.